Elias Thorne, a ruthless billionaire, built his empire to protect his young son Jasper, whose severe eczema and resulting social isolation are the weak spots in his armor of wealth. When Jasper unexpectedly forms a sincere friendship with Kofi, a poor but resilient scholarship student, Elias sees this bond as a dangerous threat to his perfectly ordered world. Yet, as he witnesses his son not only excel academically but also begin to heal from his wounds, Elias comes to embrace Jasper's connection with his new friend and ultimately entrusts Kofi's family with a meaningful foundation. If you liked the video and have subscribed to my channel, let's move on to our story. Enjoy watching. Elias Thorne's world was a fortress of polished marble and cold, reflective glass. At 42, he stood at the apex of his ambition, a self-made titan whose financial empire, Thorne Global, spanned 3 continents and moved markets with a whisper. He possessed the steely gaze of a predator and the impeccable tailored suits of a king, a man for whom no was merely a suggestion for the less determined. His triumphs were measured in billions, his life, a meticulously orchestrated symphony of power. But the fortress had a single agonizing crack: his son Jasper. Jasper Thorne was 7 years old, a frail-looking boy with a shock of sandy blonde hair and eyes the color of a stormy sea. He lived an existence shielded by wealth, yet utterly exposed. His affliction, a severe chronic eczema, rendered his skin a roadmap of angry red patches and faint, silvered scars. It was an invisible cage that wealth couldn't shatter and power couldn't mend. The finest dermatologists in the world had offered only temporary respites, never a cure. Elias, a man used to fixing everything with a signature and a wire transfer, felt a raw, persistent helplessness he loathed. Jasper's school, the Sterling Academy, was an exclusive haven for the scions of the city's elite, a place where the tuition alone could fund a small village. Elias had chosen it for its pedigree, its rigorous curriculum, and its promise of a rarefied, sheltered environment. He wanted the best, the most exceptional, for his heir. Yet, within those hallowed halls, the unwritten rules of childhood cruelty played out with the same brutal simplicity as in any playground. Jasper didn't play. He didn't race across the sprawling, manicured lawn at recess or join the boisterous circle of tag. Instead, he would retreat to a quiet, sheltered bench beneath a centuries-old oak tree, his small hands clutching a worn copy of a book on celestial bodies. The other children, the perfectly smooth-skinned, immaculately dressed sons and daughters of judges, senators, and rival CEOs, kept a meticulous distance. They didn't bully him overtly. Their exclusion was far more sophisticated, a quiet, pervasive shunning. A casual sidestep when he approached a group, a sudden end to conversation, the silent agreement that Jasper's skin was a contagion, an unpleasantness best avoided. Elias saw the evidence of this isolation in Jasper's stillness, his overly polite silence, the way his eyes always seemed to be tracing a pattern on the floor. It was a wound far deeper than the superficial lesions on his skin. It chipped away at the resilience Elias so desperately wanted to instill. He tried everything: stern talks with the headmaster, a donation for a new library wing meant to subtly encourage inclusivity, even a private session with a child psychologist who specialized in social integration. Nothing worked. His son was isolated, and Elias, for all his power, was failing. One Tuesday afternoon, Elias was observing the afternoon recess from the tinted window of the headmaster's private office, a weekly ritual he performed without the headmaster's knowledge. He was there to ensure Jasper was participating, a word he'd emphasized to the teaching staff. What he saw was the usual heartbreaking tableau. Jasper on his bench, the other boys engaged in a furious game of soccer far across the field. Elias tightened his jaw, already formulating a new, more aggressive plan to address the issue. But then the scene shifted. A new boy, a scholarship student Elias vaguely remembered reading about in the school's annual report, a necessary nod to diversity that he privately considered a regrettable dilution of the school's standards, approached the bench. The boy was darker-skinned, a deep, rich mahogany that stood in stark contrast to the pale, sun-averse complexions of the other Sterling students. His clothes were neat but clearly not bespoke. His sneakers, though clean, were scuffed. His name, Elias recalled with a flash of dismissive memory, was Kofi. Kofi didn't pause or hesitate. He walked directly to Jasper, slid onto the bench beside him, and without a word of introduction, simply pointed to the book in Jasper's lap. "Is that Saturn?" Kofi asked, his voice clear and utterly devoid of pity or revulsion. Jasper looked up, his expression a mixture of surprise and ingrained caution. He was used to being stared at, not engaged with. "No," Jasper whispered, his voice rusty from disuse. "It's the rings of Uranus. See? They're much fainter and almost vertical from this perspective." Kofi leaned in, his elbow bumping Jasper's. It was a casual, physical connection that Elias realized, with a sudden, painful clarity Jasper hadn't experienced from up here in months. "Wow," Kofi murmured, his brow furrowed in genuine curiosity. "That's heavy. Did you know the gas giants are just super cold balls of hydrogen and helium? My dad says that's why we can't land on them, they don't have a solid surface." For the next 10 minutes, Elias watched, transfixed and unsettled. The two boys were a study in opposites united by the shared world of a book. Jasper spoke more in those minutes than he had all week, his shyness melting away to reveal a passionate, articulate intellect. Kofi listened, interjecting with thoughtful questions and surprising scientific facts gleaned, Elias assumed, from television documentaries or public libraries, the resources of the common man, not the curated environment of the elite. Crucially, Kofi never once glanced at the faint angry lesions peeking out from beneath Jasper's sleeve. To Kofi, Jasper was simply a boy who knew a lot about planets. When the bell rang, Kofi clapped Jasper lightly on the shoulder, another unguarded gesture, and jogged off toward the main building. Jasper remained on the bench for a moment, a faint, unfamiliar expression of lightness on his face before slowly following. Elias walked out of the headmaster's office feeling a strange, uncomfortable turbulence. A part of him, the pure, animal father instinct, was thrilled. Jasper had interacted. Jasper had smiled. But the other part, the cold, calculating businessman who understood the rigid social hierarchies of the world, was deeply disturbed. This boy, this Kofi, was a mistake. He was an outlier, a temporary inclusion that threatened the careful, predictable order Elias had constructed for his son. Friendship was one thing. This particular friendship with a boy from a completely different stratum of society, a boy who represented the hardscrabble world Elias had fought so hard to escape and protect his son from, was unacceptable. As he drove his bespoke armored sedan away from the perfectly manicured campus, Elias called his security chief. "I need a full, discrete profile on a scholarship student at Sterling," he commanded, his voice sharp and decisive. "Name is Kofi. I want to know everything about his family, their finances, their background. And I want it on my desk by morning." The fortress walls were secure, but a small, unexpected seed of genuine human connection had just been planted within the perimeter. Elias Thorne was already moving to uproot it. The sight of Jasper's fleeting smile was a dangerous temptation, a warmth he instinctively distrusted. His son's well-being, in Elias's mind, depended on a world of predictable constants, not the messy variables of true, unplanned connection. And he would ensure that predictability was maintained, no matter the cost. The discrete profile on Kofi Krumah landed on Elias Thorne's mahogany desk precisely at 7 a.m., a crisp, unsettlingly detailed dossier compiled by a former MI6 operative now earning a lucrative living in corporate security. Elias didn't look up from his financial statements, a $100 million acquisition in Shanghai demanding his cold, surgical attention, but he felt the file's presence like an allergen. He dismissed his assistant with a curt wave and, with a heavy sigh, finally pulled the thin folder closer. Kofi's background was exactly as Elias had feared, spotless, decent, and utterly ordinary. The Krumah family lived in a modest but meticulously maintained apartment in a working-class neighborhood across the river, a place Elias hadn't set foot in since his own grueling climb out of poverty decades ago. Kofi's father, Kwame Krumah, was a skilled machinist at a manufacturing plant, a man who clocked 45 hours a week and volunteered at the local community center on Saturdays. His mother, Amma Krumah, worked as a pharmacy technician. Their combined income put them squarely in the category Elias disdainfully labeled, struggling but solvent. Kofi was an only child, a recipient of the prestigious Reginald Sterling Merit Scholarship, which covered his tuition at the elite academy. His academic record was stellar, marked by an insatiable curiosity and perfect attendance. There was no hidden agenda, no secret trust fund, no scandalous past to exploit. The Krumahs were simply good people, focused on education as the sole path to upward mobility. This lack of leverage infuriated Elias. He couldn't buy them off, threaten them with exposure, or even find a legitimate fault. Kofi was not a threat to his money, but to his carefully constructed narrative. Jasper Thorne was meant to bond with the children of future senators, judges, and investment bankers, the people who would one day hold the reins of power. Friendship with the son of a machinist, however brilliant, was an anomaly, a social misstep that Elias feared would cement Jasper's status as an outsider, dragging him down from the rarefied air he was destined to breathe. That morning, as Elias reviewed the report, he saw the results of the budding alliance in real time. Jasper descended the grand spiral staircase for breakfast not with his usual defeated slump, but with a noticeable spring in his step. He ate his perfectly portioned eggs with a rare focus, occasionally humming a tune. "Good morning, son," Elias said, setting his tablet down. He watched Jasper carefully, observing the faint but definite increase in his energy. "Morning, father. Did you know the Kuiper belt is thought to be the source of most short-period comets? Kofi was explaining it yesterday. He says it's like a giant, icy junkyard beyond Neptune." Elias felt a sharp pang of both pride and possessiveness. Jasper was animated, excited, but the source of that excitement was the unwanted variable. "Fascinating," Elias replied, keeping his voice even. "Kofi is a scholarship boy, Jasper. He attends Sterling on very specific academic merits. He's there to learn, not to socialize. You have a responsibility to focus on your studies, not distractions." Jasper's face fell instantly. The fleeting lightness vanished, replaced by the familiar veil of resignation. "He doesn't distract me, father. We talk about schoolwork. He showed me a way to remember the order of the planets using a mnemonic device. I got full marks on the pop quiz today." That stopped Elias. The boy, who had been struggling with organization and recall due to his generalized anxiety, had just achieved a perfect score. "Let me see your paper," Elias commanded, a flicker of professional interest overriding his social prejudice. Jasper produced the paper. A neat, bold A+ was circled in red at the top. Below it, in Jasper's slightly shaky handwriting, was the list of planets, accompanied by a quick sketch of the mnemonic Kofi had taught him. "My very elegant mother just served us noodles." Elias stared at the paper. His own expensive attempts to hire private tutors to improve Jasper's memory skills had been met with stubborn resistance and poor results. A simple, shared trick from a peer, a moment of unscripted collaboration, had succeeded where all his money and power had failed. The pragmatic side of Elias, the side that built empires on measurable results, registered the data point. Kofi equals academic improvement. That evening, the situation escalated from an academic curiosity to a direct challenge to Elias's authority. Elias was on a video conference finalizing a deal that would make him the majority shareholder in a massive tech company, when a sudden, unexpected sound broke the hermetic silence of his study. Laughter. It wasn't Jasper's usual tentative, stifled chuckle. This was a burst of genuine, uninhibited joy. Elias muted his microphone and walked quickly down the hall to the game room, his bespoke loafers silent on the thick Persian rug. He found the two boys sitting on the floor, surrounded by intricate plastic bricks. They were building a model of the International Space Station, an astonishingly complex structure that neither boy could have tackled alone. Kofi was pointing excitedly at a section of the solar panels, his face alight. No, the P6 truss section goes here," Kofi insisted, his voice loud and unguarded. "That's where the oldest solar wings are. We have to make it accurate." "But it's cooler this way," Jasper countered, pushing a piece into a non-structural location, then dissolving into a fit of giggles when the whole section wobbled dramatically. The sight of the two boys, shoulders touching, utterly absorbed in their shared, joyous enterprise, hit Elias with the force of a physical blow. He wasn't seeing his son's friend. He was seeing the messy, unpredictable life he had tried to sterilize out of Jasper's existence. He saw Kofi's easy confidence, his physical comfort, the way he effortlessly commanded a shared space, qualities that Jasper desperately lacked. Elias cleared his throat, the sound a low, resonant note of disapproval that immediately froze the action. Kofi's head snapped up. His eyes, dark and intelligent, showed a flash of instantaneous understanding, a preternatural awareness of his precarious position. He didn't flinch, but the laughter died instantly. "Kofi," Elias said, his voice a low, dangerous rumble. "Your parents will be expecting you." It's getting late. Kofi immediately stood, smoothly wiping a few stray pieces of plastic off his trousers. Yes, Mr. Thorne. Thank you for having me. I was just leaving. He glanced at Jasper, offering a quick, reassuring smile that spoke volumes. See you tomorrow, Thorne. Bye, Kofi, Jasper mumbled, his eyes fixed on the floor, the light extinguished. Elias watched Kofi leave, his spine ramrod straight, before turning his full, cold attention to his son. I thought we had an understanding about the amount of time you were to spend on academic pursuits, Jasper. This construction project looks like a waste of valuable study time. Jasper didn't argue. He simply began dismantling the impressive model, his movements slow and lifeless. He's helping me study, Father. He's going to tutor me in chemistry. He says I can understand stoichiometry if I think of it as a recipe. Elias sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Kofi was proving to be a highly resilient, highly effective problem, one that couldn't be solved with money or simple dismissal. His effectiveness in bolstering Jasper's academics was an undeniable metric. He delivered a final, calculated warning. Jasper, I appreciate the academic support, but you need to understand that friendship should be built with people who share your future path. Kofi is a temporary fixture at Sterling. Do not get too invested in relationships that have a clear expiration date. Do you understand? Jasper nodded, looking smaller than ever. Yes, Father. Elias walked back to his study, the unsettling silence of the house once again engulfing him. He had won the immediate battle, asserting his dominance and injecting a necessary dose of social reality. But as he sat back down to his billion-dollar deal, he couldn't shake the image of the two boys, their heads bent in shared conspiracy over the plastic bricks. He had traded Jasper's fleeting, genuine happiness for order. And for the first time in a long time, Elias Thorne wondered if the trade was worth the cost. The data was mixed. Academic progress was up, but his son's spirit was noticeably, deliberately dimmed. The unwanted variable, Kofi Kruma, was not easily eliminated. His impact was already measurable. The quiet tension in the Thorne household calcified into a daily, unspoken ritual. Elias, the master strategist, had tried a direct frontal assault to end the friendship with Kofi and had failed. Now he switched to a campaign of subtle, insidious erosion. He tightened Jasper's schedule with the precision of a Swiss clock, filling every available slot with activities designed to prevent organic interaction with the scholarship student. Mondays became the domain of classical Mandarin tutors. Wednesdays, advanced data science seminars. Fridays, private lessons with a renowned fencing master. The message was clear. There was no room in Jasper's future for unplanned downtime, and certainly no room for the Kruma boy. Elias even assigned a series of impossibly long, complex research projects, reports on global macroeconomic trends and advanced physics theories, that he hoped would monopolize Jasper's focus and energy. Yet, Jasper, motivated by the secret lifeline of his friendship, adapted with a quiet, fierce ingenuity Elias hadn't anticipated. He began to thrive under the crushing pressure, not in spite of Kofi but because of him. The two boys found ways to bypass the fortress of Jasper's schedule. Elias would often find Jasper in his study late at night, supposedly immersed in his assigned reports. He'd be focused, his concentration a deep, palpable thing. But when Elias glanced at the screen, the data wasn't just raw research, it was clearly being collaborated upon. One evening, Jasper was wrestling with the complexity of quantum entanglement, an absurd assignment for a 7-year-old, even one with Jasper's intellect. Elias walked in to check on his son, expecting to find him frustrated. Instead, Jasper was meticulously diagramming a concept on a whiteboard. "How are you making sense of this, Jasper?" Elias asked, genuinely surprised by the coherent visualization. "Kofi sent me an analogy, Father. He said to think of it like two flashlights miles apart, that are turned on and off at the exact same moment. They're separate but their actions are linked, instantly. The distance doesn't matter." Elias felt a surge of professional admiration for the clarity of the analogy, immediately followed by the bitter taste of resentment. He had unwittingly tasked his son's rival with being his primary tutor. Kofi was not only academically gifted but possessed the rare ability to translate dense, abstract concepts into simple, relatable terms, a skill far more valuable than any amount of inherited wealth. The real, undeniable evidence of Kofi's positive influence, however, was in Jasper's social and emotional development. Jasper's eczema, though chronic, was highly stress-responsive. When he was anxious, isolated, or unhappy, the visible lesions on his arms, neck, and face would flare up, becoming angry red and weeping. The constant, visible reminder of his suffering tormented Elias. But now, a noticeable change was occurring. With the steady, dependable presence of Kofi in his life, a peer who looked past the skin to the brilliant mind and kind heart beneath, Jasper was becoming calmer. He was sleeping better, and his overall anxiety levels dropped. The red patches were still there, a roadmap of past struggles, but the intensity had lessened. The inflammation was receding, replaced by paler, less aggressive scar tissue. His skin, and consequently his demeanor, was visibly healing. His teachers too noted the transformation. The headmaster, discreetly summoned by Elias for a midterm update, spoke in hushed, pleased tones. "Mr. Thorne, Jasper is a different boy. He's begun to contribute in class discussions, offering insights that surprise even the most veteran instructors. He was even nominated for the Sterling Scholar of the Week award, which requires a student to demonstrate leadership and generosity of spirit. He's come out of his shell. We attribute much of this to the mentoring role he seems to have developed with young Mr. Kruma." Elias listened, his body rigid in the leather armchair. Every piece of empirical data, the A+ grades, the coherent explanation of quantum physics, the measurable decrease in his son's physiological markers of stress, pointed to a single, inescapable conclusion. Kofi Kruma was the best thing that had ever happened to Jasper. But acceptance was a long, painful process for a man whose life was built on controlling every variable. He still viewed Kofi's background as a fundamental flaw, a social incompatibility that would inevitably lead to disappointment or embarrassment. The true turning point, the moment that finally began to shatter the gilded walls of Elias's prejudice, came during a school assembly. Elias was attending, begrudgingly, to watch Jasper receive a merit certificate for his academic performance. During the presentation, the lights unexpectedly flickered and died, plunging the auditorium into a temporary, startled silence. Panic immediately rippled through the young students, including Jasper, who froze, his hand instinctively reaching up to scratch a nervous patch on his neck. Then Elias heard a voice, clear, calm, and utterly unafraid, ring out from the darkness. "It's okay. It's just a thermal cutout from too many lights on the circuit. Don't worry, the emergency battery is charging up the system now. Everyone just stay put." It was Kofi. He was using his knowledge, gleaned perhaps from observing his machinist father, to calm the room. While teachers scrambled for flashlights and the headmaster muttered into a dead microphone, Kofi's voice was the sole anchor. Within seconds, the emergency lights softly illuminated the hall. Kofi, standing near the back, was entirely unfazed. Jasper, who had been on the verge of a full-blown anxiety attack, let out a shaky breath, his hand dropping away from his skin. He looked directly at Kofi and gave a small, grateful nod. In that moment of chaos and clarity, Elias Thorne saw Kofi Kruma not as a social anomaly, a statistic, or a poor kid, but as a force of competence, stability, and genuine courage. He was the unflappable protector, the source of calm that Elias himself, with all his wealth and power, could not be for his son. Elias had protected Jasper from the outside world with money. Kofi protected him in the outside world with confidence. Driving home that evening, the heavy silence of the car was finally broken by Elias. "Jasper," he said, his voice husky with a feeling he refused to name. "Kofi, he handled that well today. The way he spoke during the blackout." Jasper looked at him, his expression cautious, waiting for the inevitable critical addendum. "He's very smart, father. He's going to build rockets one day. He says he wants to design habitats for the Martian surface." Elias paused, taking in the ambition, the intellect, the sheer scope of the boy's dreams. Elias had spent his life accumulating paper assets. Kofi was aiming for the stars. "He may very well do that, son," Elias conceded, a tiny, almost imperceptible shift occurring in the cold, hard walls of his heart. He still didn't like the messy unpredictability of the friendship, but he was forced to acknowledge its undeniable, transformative power. He had sought to control his son's life to ensure his happiness and success. He was slowly realizing that the genuine connection he had tried to extinguish was, paradoxically, the very thing fostering both. For the first time, Elias Thorne considered the possibility that his rigid, fear-based control was less valuable than his son's spontaneous, authentic joy. Elias Thorne, a man accustomed to the clean lines of a balance sheet, found himself in the agonizing, complex process of re-evaluating his entire emotional ledger. He still hadn't completely shed his prejudice. The instinct to protect his son from the social wrongness of a low-status friendship remained. But the objective, measurable facts of Jasper's flourishing were too powerful to ignore. Jasper's improved academic standing, his enhanced social courage, and most importantly, the visible healing of his chronic eczema had created a new data point. Kofi was indispensable. The true transformation began not with a shared victory, but a shared moment of vulnerability, a vulnerability Elias himself rarely allowed. One chilly Thursday afternoon, Elias arrived at Sterling Academy early to pick up Jasper. He found his son hunched over in the school nurse's office, his shirt off, while the nurse gently applied a heavy, medicated cream to his back and arms. A severe flare-up had been triggered by the stress of a sudden, surprise oral presentation in front of the whole class. Jasper was fighting back tears, his small body tense with shame and discomfort. The red patches were angry and weeping, the skin hot to the touch. As Elias stood in the doorway, a stone of helplessness settling in his stomach, Kofi walked into the office. He wasn't there for himself. He had simply followed Jasper, not out of morbid curiosity, but out of quiet, steadfast concern. Kofi didn't say anything dramatic. He didn't gasp or recoil. He simply approached the examination table where Jasper was sitting, looked at the raw, inflamed skin, and pulled up a stool beside him. "Man, the atopic dermatitis has got you bad this time, huh?" Kofi said softly, using the clinical term for the condition, neutralizing it with science. Jasper, humiliated by his father's witness and Kofi's presence, pulled his knees up to his chest. "It hurts, Kofi. Everyone stares and then it gets worse." Kofi nodded, his expression completely empathetic. He then did something Elias never would have expected. He pulled up the sleeve of his own uniform shirt, revealing a patch of skin just above his elbow. It was perfectly smooth, dark skin, save for a pale, quarter-sized keloid scar, a raised, tough growth of skin that had clearly been the result of a severe burn, perhaps years ago. "My dad's a machinist, remember?" Kofi said, turning the scar toward Jasper. "When I was 4, I touched a superheated metal lathe he hadn't properly shielded. It was the worst pain of my life. I had to wear special dressings for months. It left this." He tapped the scar. "It used to glow in the light. Now it's just me. It tells a story. And yours?" Kofi gestured toward Jasper's back. "Yours tells a story about how your body is fighting hard all the time. It's a battle map, not a mistake." Elias, standing silently by the door, felt the breath momentarily knocked out of him. He had spent 7 years and millions of dollars trying to erase the evidence of his son's suffering, teaching Jasper to hide the scars, to feel shame. And in less than 2 minutes, Kofi had offered a profound, life-altering reframing. The scars were not a mark of brokenness, but a testament to resilience. When the nurse finished, Kofi helped Jasper slowly put his shirt back on, adjusting the collar with a delicate, practiced care. "I heard you froze up during the presentation, Thorne. Don't sweat it. You know that stuff about the Haber-Bosch process better than anyone in the room. Next time, look at me. I'll make a stupid face and you'll remember you're only talking to people. Not judges. Just people." Kofi's simple, unpretentious counsel held more genuine psychological weight than all the sessions with the high-priced child therapists Elias had employed. As Elias drove the two boys home, he had insisted on driving Kofi, a gesture that cost him significant pride but was necessary to observe the interaction. The car was filled with the low, comfortable murmur of their conversation. They weren't talking about school or planets. They were discussing the common anxieties of being an anomaly in an elite world. Kofi confessed how much pressure he felt to succeed, to prove he belonged despite his background. Jasper admitted how much he feared public speaking and disappointing his father. Elias listened, an uncomfortable truth dawning on him. Kofi wasn't a distraction from Jasper's problems, he was a mirror for them. Both boys carried a heavy, shared burden, the enormous, crushing expectations of their respective families. One was burdened by the expectation of inheriting billions, the other by the expectation of earning his first 1,000. That evening, Elias did something entirely out of character. He called Kofi's father, Kwame Nkrumah, ostensibly to arrange better transport logistics. "Mr. Kruma," Elias began, his tone stiff and formal. "Elias Thorne. I wanted to discuss the pickup arrangements for Kofi and Jasper. It seems they are spending increasing amounts of time together." Kwame's voice over the phone was measured and strong, lacking any deference. "Mr. Thorne. We appreciate the scholarship. Kofi knows his boundaries and he is a guest. But he is also a boy. He enjoys Jasper's company. They are having a significant positive impact on each other's academic progress," Elias conceded, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. "Good," Kwame replied simply. "A good friendship is more valuable than any grade, Mr. Thorne. My son is teaching your son about life. Your son is teaching mine about stars. Sounds like a fair trade." That uncomplicated, confident assertion, that human connection trumped all material and academic metrics, struck Elias deeply. He realized his original fear, that Kofi would somehow taint Jasper with his poverty, was absurd. Kofi wasn't taking anything from Jasper. He was giving him something invaluable, a sense of self-worth and a shield against social cruelty. In a moment of radical honesty, Elias asked a question that had been haunting him since the school nurse's office. "Mr. Kruma, I saw the scar on your son's arm today. It was from a lathe accident. Did it bother him growing up? The way other children might have reacted?" There was a brief silence on the line. Then Kwame Kruma spoke, his voice gentle but firm. "Mr. Thorne, every child has something they wish they could change. My job, and I think yours, is to teach them that the things that make them different are not weaknesses. They are markers of their survival. Kofi learned to own his story. Your son will too." Elias hung up the phone, the cold walls around his heart now not just cracked but crumbling. He had learned more about fatherhood and resilience in that single conversation than in all his years of striving for perfection. The unwanted variable, Kofi Kruma, had not only solved Jasper's social isolation but was now, indirectly, teaching Elias Thorne how to be a father. The pursuit of wealth had been a quest for control. He was finally learning the power of letting go. The shift in Elias Thorne's perspective was not a sudden, dramatic conversion but a gradual, humbling acceptance of empirical truth. His business mind, always prioritizing results, could no longer deny the evidence. Kofi Kruma was a value add, not a liability. This realization culminated in an unprecedented invitation. Elias would personally host Kofi for an entire Saturday, an intimate, unfiltered look into the gilded cage he called home. The day began with an awkward formality. Kofi arrived precisely on time, dressed in an impeccably clean, if slightly faded, polo shirt. Kwame Kruma, who drove him, exchanged a brief, stiff nod with Elias at the gate, the shared moment carrying the weight of their unspoken, class-defined tension. Elias felt the need to prove that his wealth was earned, not merely inherited. A subconscious need he hadn't experienced since his early days of trying to impress seasoned venture capitalists. Jasper, for his part, was ecstatic. He bounded down the steps, pulling Kofi toward the vast, empty mansion and a tour that revealed the Thorne family's esoteric interests. They spent the first hour in Elias's private observatory, a glass dome atop the highest wing of the house. "This is a Ritchie-Chrétien reflector," Elias explained, pointing to the massive, gleaming telescope. He spoke to Kofi with the same detailed respect he usually reserved for his company's engineers. Kofi's eyes, wide with genuine awe, scanned the complex machinery. "The primary mirror is corrected for both spherical and coma aberration. Wow. You can see the globular clusters with this, Mr. Thorne. This is better than the university's setup." Elias felt a surge of pride, not in his ownership of the equipment, but in the boy's ability to appreciate its technical perfection. Kofi didn't gawk at the cost. He understood the science. The afternoon took an unexpected turn when the boys decided to visit Elias's home office. Jasper wanted to show Kofi the elaborate digital stock ticker that scrolled across one wall. Kofi didn't focus on the fluctuating numbers or the complex financial charts. He stopped in front of a framed, slightly yellowed photograph tucked behind Elias's massive monitor. A picture of a much younger, much harder-looking Elias, standing in front of a crumbling brick factory with a degree in his hand. "Who's this?" Kofi asked, pointing at the picture. Jasper giggled. "That's father before he was rich." Elias tensed, ready to shut down the conversation. He rarely spoke of his own grinding, impoverished origins. That chapter of his life was meticulously archived and labeled closed. Kofi looked at Elias with sudden, piercing understanding. You came from that, Mr. Thorne? My dad says he used to work on machines like those. The grime and the heat, they stick with you. It was a simple, profound connection. Kofi saw the scars of Elias's struggle, not the polished veneer of his success. In that moment, the immense social distance between the machinist's son and the billionaire melted away. They were two men who understood the unforgiving nature of a world that didn't give away its advantages easily. Yes, Elias said, his voice softer than usual. I did. That was the day I graduated. My first factory job. It looks heavy, Kofi mused, still staring at the photo. It was, Elias confirmed. But it taught me the value of leverage. Finding the single, small effort that yields the largest return. That evening, the three of them sat down for dinner in the grand, silent dining hall. Elias watched intently. This was the true test. How would the unpolished boy from across the river handle the formal setting, the complicated cutlery, the quiet surveillance of the household staff? Kofi handled it not with practiced elegance, but with unassuming confidence. He observed Jasper, followed the cues, and asked direct, intelligent questions about the food, the city's history, and the state of global space exploration. He wasn't trying to pretend to be someone he wasn't. He was simply being himself, a thoughtful, curious young man. During dessert, Jasper brought up a problem he was having with his advanced mathematics class. A concept involving differential equations introduced as a challenge problem. I just can't grasp the concept of the derivative as a rate of change, Jasper admitted, pushing his fork around his plate. Kofi didn't pull out a paper or a pen. He paused, looked at the half-filled water glass on the table, and set a sugar cube on the edge. Okay, imagine the water level in this glass is the amount of work you've done on a project. It's changing, right? The derivative is not the total amount of water. It's the speed at which the water is rising, the rate of change at this exact moment, Kofi explained, gently tipping the glass to demonstrate the instantaneous slope of the water. Elias, who understood the concept purely in abstract algebraic terms, was mesmerized by the tangible, intuitive clarity of the explanation. He realized that Kofi wasn't just smart, he was an exceptional communicator and mentor. The success of the day, the pure, unforced joy radiating from Jasper, and the sheer competence of Kofi finally dissolved the last remnants of Elias's resistance. He saw the truth clearly. For all his millions, he could not buy the one thing Jasper truly needed: authentic human connection and a grounding in real-world resilience. Kofi supplied both. As Kofi was preparing to leave, Elias walked him to the car, standing in the cold night air while the security gate hissed open. Kofi, Elias said, laying a rare, heavy hand on the boy's shoulder. You are a remarkable young man. You've had a profound impact on my son. Kofi looked up at the towering figure of the billionaire, his eyes steady. Jasper is the kindest person I know, Mr. Thorne. You just needed someone to see past the skin. Everyone's fighting a battle you can't see. His is just visible. That evening, after Jasper was asleep, Elias stood at the window, looking out over the sprawling, silent estate. He felt an uncomfortable but profound sense of gratitude. Kofi Nkrumah was a mirror reflecting the harsh realities and quiet strengths Elias had forgotten in his ascent to power. Elias pulled out a fresh, blank pad of paper, the start of a new business venture. But this time, the venture wouldn't be about increasing profit margins. It would be about replicating the success he had seen today. He needed to find a way to make the kind of opportunity, mentorship, and grounding Kofi provided available to every child who was fighting a battle, whether visible or hidden. He wrote 2 words at the top of the pad, underlining them sharply: the foundation. The next phase of his life, a new legacy built on something other than financial dominance, had just begun. The shift from billionaire businessman to burgeoning philanthropist wasn't immediate, but the momentum was irreversible. Elias Thorne, whose identity had always been defined by his net worth, now found himself utterly consumed by the intricacies of the Thorne Foundation. The motivation was no longer profit, it was replication. He needed to understand the exact ingredients of the positive change he'd witnessed in Jasper and find a way to bottle and dispense that formula. His immense office, usually the nerve center for global finance, was transformed into a strategy room for social impact. Gone were the charts detailing mergers and acquisitions. In their place were flowcharts mapping out mentorship programs, academic support models, and pathways for underprivileged children to access specialized education. Elias applied the same ruthless efficiency and analytic rigor to philanthropy that he had to business. He demanded data. What was the measurable effect of a supportive peer network on academic success? How did self-esteem, fostered by genuine friendship, affect physiological markers of stress like eczema? He wasn't interested in simple donations. He wanted scalable, measurable, and sustainable change. The core philosophy of the foundation, distilled from the Jasper-Kofi dynamic, rested on 3 pillars. Peer-to-peer mentorship, not from adults but from competent, grounded peers who provided a sense of normalcy and resilience. Access to specialized interests, providing resources, like the high-end telescope or advanced computer software, to children from humble backgrounds whose passions were often financially inaccessible. Reframing vulnerability, teaching children that their personal challenges, be they poverty, health issues, or social anxiety, were sources of strength and unique perspective, not shame. Elias spent weeks interviewing sociologists, educational reformists, and experts in child psychology. He dismissed most of them. They spoke in abstract, bureaucratic terms. He spoke in the concrete language of human connection. He realized the most vital asset for the foundation already existed. Elias made a second, more formal call to Kwame Nkrumah, Kofi's father. This time there was no awkward formality. "Mr. Nkrumah," Elias began, "I am establishing a foundation aimed at supporting exceptionally promising children from backgrounds that lack access to elite resources. I believe your perspective on this is invaluable. I'm prepared to offer you a significant advisory role." Kwame listened patiently. "With all respect, Mr. Thorne, I'm a machinist. I work with my hands. I don't advise billionaires. You are a father who has raised an extraordinary son under considerable pressure," Elias countered, leaning forward onto his desk. "You understand the infrastructure of support required to achieve that success. That's the expertise I need. I need to know the reality of the struggle, not the theory. I want to build a bridge, but I need to know where your side of the riverbank is." After a long pause, Kwame agreed to a meeting. Not in Elias's gilded office, but at a modest, honest coffee shop near the machine plant. Elias, dressed in a muted cashmere sweater rather than a suit, arrived alone. The conversation was blunt and transformative. Kwame didn't ask for a high-paying job. He spoke about the challenges of working parents, the crippling fear of not being able to afford the next thing, a specialized summer camp, a high-quality laptop, an expensive entrance exam fee. "Kofi has to carry the weight of all our hopes, Mr. Thorne," Kwame explained, stirring his coffee. "He knows this is his one chance. Your son has an entire safety net. Our children have a tightrope. Your foundation needs to build a wider net, not just a bigger spotlight." He gave Elias concrete advice. The foundation needed to pay for things that seemed minor but were catastrophic hurdles: transportation costs, specialized learning materials, nutritious meals. "And you need to hire people who understand the tightrope," Kwame concluded. While the foundation took shape, the relationship between Elias and Jasper blossomed in unexpected ways. Elias began to talk to Jasper not just about academics, but about the process of building something new. "I'm starting a foundation, son," Elias told Jasper one evening. "It's designed to help children who are smart and capable, but who need a boost to get into places like Sterling." Jasper's eyes lit up. "Like Kofi?" "Exactly like Kofi. He is the reason for this, Jasper. Your friendship showed me what was truly necessary. I was so busy trying to protect you from the world, I almost robbed you of the very thing that made you stronger." In a moment of profound openness, Elias spoke about his own scars, not physical ones but the deep, formative wounds of poverty and insecurity. He showed Jasper the photograph of the old factory and confessed the shame he had always felt about his origins. "Your eczema, your scars," Elias said, looking his son directly in the eye, "they are real. They are part of you. But they are a fraction of who you are. Your empathy and your mind, that's the whole picture." Kofi saw that immediately. "I was too slow." Jasper, hearing his father admit fault and vulnerability, offered a fragile, true smile. He no longer felt he had to hide his skin or his friendship. He had a shared mission with his father, ensuring other children could find their own Kofi. Elias had established the formal structure of the Legacy Compass Foundation. He had committed an initial endowment of $500 million and had secured the crucial, grounding involvement of Kwame Nkrumah as a senior advisor. The foundation was a tangible acknowledgement that genuine human value lies not in acquired wealth, but in inherent intelligence, kindness, and resilience, regardless of where those qualities originate. The ruthless mogul was learning to love the messy complexity of human growth. The Legacy Compass Foundation was more than just a name and an endowment. It was a physical space and a dynamic program meticulously designed to foster the kind of authentic connection that transformed Jasper. Elias had repurposed a large, neglected downtown building, transforming it into a state-of-the-art center, a haven of advanced technology, quiet study nooks, and collaborative project rooms. It was intentionally neutral territory, stripped of the sterile, isolating wealth of the Thorne mansion and the grinding anxiety of the working-class neighborhood. The launch event was a convergence of worlds. Politicians, educational leaders, and members of the press mingled with the foundation's first cohort of scholarship recipients and their families. Elias, usually stiff and controlling in public, was surprisingly at ease. He wasn't selling a product, he was unveiling his legacy. Jasper, now 8, stood proudly by his father, his demeanor confident and his skin notably clearer. He was the foundation's quiet, living proof. He watched Kofi, who was enthusiastically explaining the principles of aerodynamics to a group of younger children using a 3D printed model of a rocket. Kofi's comfortable presence in this elite setting was a victory for them both. The greatest measure of change, however, was in the relationship between Elias and Kwame Nkrumah. Standing together near the entrance, the billionaire and the machinist discussed the foundation's operating metrics. "The transport budget needs an immediate increase, Mr. Thorne," Kwame stated, holding a tablet displaying cost breakdowns. "We can't expect parents to sacrifice work hours to get the children here consistently. Reliability is the first step to trust." Elias didn't argue. "You're absolutely right, Kwame. Adjust the allocation. Draw it from the administrative overhead. We're here to serve the children, not the bureaucracy." The formality of Mr. Nkrumah and Mr. Thorne had dissolved into first names in their private discussions, a testament to the mutual respect forged through shared purpose. Elias had learned that Kwame's practical, grounded perspective was the foundation's most valuable asset. Kwame was the moral compass, ensuring the legacy compass never drifted into theoretical altruism. The highlight of the launch was Elias's speech. He stepped onto the podium, the lights reflecting off his polished watch, but his focus was inward. He set aside the prepared remarks written by his PR team, flowery prose about community uplift, and spoke from the heart. "I built my career on understanding value," Elias began, his voice carrying the authority of billions. "I looked for assets that were undervalued, overlooked, or simply needed capital to unlock their potential. And for years I believed that meant property or companies or commodities." He paused, glancing toward Jasper and Kofi, who were now engaged in a serious discussion about orbital mechanics. "Then I watched my son Jasper struggle with a visible mark of difference, his eczema, his scars. And I watched him retreat into isolation. I tried to fix it with money, with private tutors, with isolation. I failed." A ripple of uncomfortable silence went through the elite crowd. Elias wasn't selling success, he was confessing failure. The thing that changed everything wasn't a treatment or a tutor. It was a friendship. It was a young man named Kofi Nkrumah, a merit scholar, who didn't see my son's affliction as a flaw, but as a marker of resilience. He spoke of Kofi's simple wisdom, of the clarity he brought to complex ideas, and the courage he shared effortlessly. Kofi didn't need my money, he needed a seat at the table. He needed access to resources that would match his extraordinary intellect. And Jasper, my son, didn't need more shielding. He needed the honesty and empathy that only a genuine peer connection could provide. Kofi taught us both that real strength is found not in hiding your scars, but in owning your story. Elias announced the foundation's central tenet: to seek out and support the overlooked human capital, the children with innate brilliance whose only barrier was circumstance. He committed to providing not just financial aid, but curated mentorship and a network of peers who understood the unique pressure of succeeding against the odds. After the speeches, as the center buzzed with excitement, Elias found Jasper waiting for him, clutching a brochure for the foundation. "Father," Jasper said quietly, looking down at his arm where the eczema scars were barely visible beneath his shirt cuff. "Did you mean what you said? About my scars?" Elias knelt, bringing himself level with his son. He gently traced the faint, pale line of a scar on Jasper's forearm. "I meant every word, son. They are a memory of a hard battle you won. Every time you see them, remember that you are a survivor. And remember Kofi." "I will," Jasper smiled. "He says we are going to use the 3D printer here to build a prototype for a new kind of space rover. We're going to call it the Legacy. It'll be a machine that looks for life in places everyone else has given up on." Elias stood up, looking at the two boys. Jasper, the son of privilege now grounded in empathy. Kofi, the son of perseverance now given limitless opportunity. He realized his true legacy wouldn't be the skyscrapers he owned or the deals he closed. It would be the Legacy Compass Foundation and the simple, enduring fact that he had finally learned to value human connection above all things. He had tried to buy his son's happiness. In the end, he had to earn it by becoming a better man, guided by the wisdom of a poor black boy and his pragmatic father. The old fortress of Elias Thorne's heart was entirely torn down. 3 years had passed since the launch of the Legacy Compass Foundation. Elias Thorne, now 45, had traded the relentless pursuit of corporate dominance for a different kind of fulfillment. He remained the CEO of Thorne Global, but his focus had fundamentally shifted. His company's profitability was now a means to sustain and grow his true legacy. The foundation had matured into a national model, successfully funding and mentoring hundreds of children across the country, creating a measurable impact on closing the achievement gap. The final and most profound measure of this transformation was the enduring strength of the friendship that started it all. Jasper Thorne, now 10, was a confident, articulate boy. His eczema was in near total remission, the flare-ups rare and stress-induced anxiety a thing of the past. The faint scars on his skin were simply part of him, no longer a source of shame. He was no longer defined by his affliction or his father's wealth. He was defined by his burgeoning intellect and his capacity for leadership. Kofi Krumah, also 10, was thriving. The resources provided by the foundation, which he accessed anonymously through a general scholarship fund, maintaining his sense of earned merit, allowed him to excel. He was accepted into an exclusive pre-engineering program at a prestigious university and spent his weekends at the Foundation Center, running the robotics club he had established. He and Jasper remained inseparable, their shared life a seamless blend of theoretical physics and shared jokes. The Anniversary Gala. The Foundation's third anniversary gala was held in the grand ballroom of the city's premier museum, a space Elias had once rented only for corporate celebrations. This time, the mood was warmer, anchored by a deep sense of shared purpose. Elias watched from the side of the room as Jasper and Kofi, both dressed in sharp suits, moved effortlessly through the crowd. They weren't hiding. They were engaging, speaking eloquently about their collaborative project, a detailed, long-term plan for a sustainable lunar habitat, a testament to their mutual interest in space and engineering. Elias approached his son and Kofi, his expression warm. "You two are quite the team. Kofi, your presentation on resource recycling was exceptional." Kofi smiled, a familiar, grounded look in his eyes. "Thank you, Mr. Thorne. It's funny, I used the same principles my dad taught me about minimizing waste on the factory floor, just scaled up for space." Elias felt a surge of gratitude for Kwame, who stood nearby talking animatedly with a city councilman. Kwame, now the Foundation's executive director of community outreach, commanded respect not through title, but through his unshakable integrity and practical wisdom. The initial awkwardness between the billionaire and the machinist had been replaced by a powerful, synergistic partnership. The true legacy. Later that evening, as the crowd thinned, Elias stood with Jasper by a large, silent exhibit of celestial maps. "Father," Jasper said, looking up at him, "do you ever miss the way things were? When you were just running the company?" Elias put his hand on his son's shoulder. "I was successful, Jasper, but I wasn't complete. I was running from my own story, trying to build a fortress for you. But a fortress is also a prison." He turned Jasper to face him. "What Kofi taught me and what you lived, is that real strength is in building bridges, not walls. The Legacy Compass Foundation isn't about me giving away money. It's about me finally learning the value of things that can't be bought: authenticity, resilience, and true friendship." Elias knew his life had come full circle. He had spent decades climbing out of poverty, terrified that any connection to his humble past, or any perceived imperfection in his son, would ruin his status. That fear had nearly crippled his son with isolation. It took a boy from the exact background he tried to escape, a boy who carried his own quiet dignity and competence, to save his son and consequently save him. The scars on Jasper's body were barely noticeable, a subtle reminder of a hard-won victory. The scars on Elias's heart, the fear, the pride, the prejudice, had been replaced by the quiet, enduring strength of empathy and purpose. Elias Thorne, the wealthy businessman, had finally created a legacy that transcended his financial empire. It was a testament to the power of a single genuine friendship that forced him to confront his own biases and embrace the messy, beautiful variables of the human spirit. He looked across the room at Kofi, laughing with his son, and knew with absolute certainty that his greatest return on investment was the unquantifiable joy of witnessing their shared, bright future. Dear viewer, if you've watched up to this point, thank you for your support. I have a small request. If you enjoy my stories, you can subscribe to the channel, and don't hesitate to share your thoughts about the stories in the comments. Enjoy watching. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and like the video.